The first reading today, we hear about the just man, or as we know, that same word that is translated as just is also translated as righteous. Which would probably be a better way to put it. The righteous man will give his heart to resort early to the Lord his Maker and will pray in the sight of the Most High. In other words, if we truly want to be holy, there is no possible way that this can be done apart from prayer. If you want to become more like God, you need to spend time with Him. It's really just that simple. You become like the people that you associate with. And so, therefore, we need to associate more with God if we want to be like Him. Now, we can also, as we go along, listen to the words that are spoken of this man. And at the end of the reading, it talks about how, through all generations his name will live, people will speak of his wisdom, the assembly will sing his praises, and so on. And we might be tempted to look at that and say, well, if I do that, people will think well of me. People will remember me. People will want to talk to me or whatever. If one is truly righteous, none of those kinds of thoughts would ever enter their mind. In fact, just the opposite. They just want to be with the Lord. Because God will give them that wisdom that comes only through prayer, they will share that with others. But it's not trying to show off. It's not trying to look for attention. It's just they see the truth and they speak it. And the wonderful thing is that this is something that is possible for every single person, regardless. Today we celebrate someone who's a doctor of the church, so somebody who's very advanced. And yet at the same time, we look at somebody like St. Therese, who's now been made a doctor of the church. And she, as far as education goes, wasn't all that advanced. St. Teresa of Avila didn't have much of any education at all and is a doctor of the church. Brilliant, and yet not educated. And you see this also, especially in somebody like a St. Bernadette Soubirous, the one that the Mother Superior said was worthless because she couldn't do anything. And yet when the theologians came and talked to her and asked her questions about Our Lady's apparitions, she astounded them with the answers that she was giving and just blew them away with her insight. She had no education. She was not an intelligent girl necessarily as far as any kind of education went, but her prayer was so profound that she was able to see into the depth of the mysteries of God. And she was able to expound things that the theologians couldn't understand. And the reason they couldn't understand it is because they didn't pray. It's just that simple. St. Gregory Nazianzen said that 1,800 years ago or whatever it was. He said a theologian's ability is equal to the depth of his prayer. That's why St. Gregory Nazianzen was able to write about the Trinity, because his prayer was that deep. Obviously, again, he had great intelligence, but it wasn't his learning that allowed him to do that. It wasn't his education that allowed him to do that. It was his prayer that allowed him to do that. And so that's something that all of us are able to do. Every single one of us has access to the wisdom of God, because the wisdom of God is God. And every one of us has access to God. So whether you are highly educated or not very educated, whether you're a genius or whether you're not very smart, it doesn't matter. In fact, Scripture makes very clear that to those who are simple, to those who are not learned, God reveals the most sublime mysteries. Because those people in their simplicity don't get in the way. If we think that we can figure it out, then we basically tell God to get out of the way. I can handle this myself. People who are simple don't do that. They just receive what God gives them. And what God gives them is himself. And that is a treasure that is infinite. It is something they can continue to meditate upon for the rest of their life and never come even close to the end. And yet can be so profound that the most educated people will not be able to grasp what they're talking about. And yet so simple that uneducated people can grasp what they're talking about. It's amazing how God works, isn't it? And so we need each one of us to be able to look at that and say, what is most important is my prayer life. Pure and simple. It is really just that simple. The single most important thing in your life should be your prayer, because God himself is what is most important. That should be our top priority, and so union with him is what we need to be about. And so look seriously at your prayer. Because way too many Catholics, I have heard this so many times over the years. We were taught that all we had to do was a morning offering and everything else in the day was a prayer, so that's all I have to do. Right. Or the ones that the priests love to do, my work is my prayer. Isn't that cute? What a bunch of garbage. Yeah, your work is prayer if it's done with the Lord. But your work isn't going to be prayer if you don't have a prayer life to work with. The prayer has to come first before anything else can happen. And so we're not talking here just about saying prayers. That can never, ever be abandoned. We must say our prayers. But we must spend the time in silence, in quiet, and let the Lord speak to our hearts. The Lord speaks in silence. He doesn't speak in noise. And so if we fill our lives with noise instead of quiet, we can't hear him. If we are just active and running around all the time and we don't take the time to calm down and listen, we're not going to be able to hear him. And that's where the devil's going to have a field day. Even if you want to run around and do all kinds of really good things, and good they are. But you know what? The devil is going to load you up with good things in order to keep you from what is best. If he can't get you to do bad things, he'll give you a whole bunch of good things to do. And because they're good, you're going to automatically assume that they're from God. But if they're keeping you from what's best, they're not from God. And it's a very easy temptation that lots and lots of people fall into. So again, we have to look at the priorities. Prayer must come first. By that, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be the first thing in your day as far as chronology, but it must be the priority. So I always tell people, have a plan A and a plan B. Plan A is I pray at this time, whatever time that happens to be. Or you can couple it with an event. As soon as I brush my teeth, or as soon as I do the dishes, or as soon as something you know you're going to do every day, it may be at a little bit of a different time depending on your schedule, doesn't matter. But what comes next is prayer. But if you can set it for a schedule, at this time, whatever time that is, that's going to be my prayer time. But every once in a while, something might come up that you can't get around. What's plan B? If I can't pray at the time when I normally do, when am I going to do it? So even there, at the beginning of your day, you're looking at when am I going to pray? It's the priority. Everything is going to revolve around that. Now, the American problem is that we're too busy. As a priest told me years ago, if you're too busy to pray, you're too busy. Cut some stuff out. There's lots of junk that we're doing that we don't need to be doing, but it fills our time, and then we don't have time for God. And I know that they are really, really important things, like looking at our text messages and looking up the things on the internet and watching TV or whatever. But, do we really need to have those really important things in our lives if we're not getting to prayer? We need to get rid of some of these things and go to prayer and ask God what needs to go. If you look at your life and say, yeah, but everything that I'm doing is good, then ask God which ones he wants you to get rid of, which ones are not from him. Because, once again, as I said, the devil will give you good things if he can't get you to do bad things. But the good things the devil gives you is to keep you from prayer, is to keep you from God, keep you from becoming who God created you to be, which can only happen through prayer. And that is what Satan fears the most. Because if you start to pray and you start being purified, you're going to grow in humility. He has none of that, and he can't defeat it. You're going to grow in charity, and he doesn't have any of that either. So that's what he fears the most. That you're going to actually focus on God, that you're going to be zeroed in prayer, and that you want to serve the Lord. Otherwise, all those good things that we do, his temptation is, you can do this for yourself. People will pat me on the back. People will think I'm really nice. People will, whatever. And how easy it is to get those selfish motives worked in. When you go to prayer, we can even start for selfish reasons, but God knows us well enough. He's going to take that away pretty quickly. So I love to go to prayer because it's filled with consolation. Guess what's going to happen? There won't be any. You're going to sit there for a half an hour in dead silence, and it can be pretty painful sometimes because he's showing you your own sinfulness, your own woundedness, your own brokenness, the things that need to be worked on. Pretty soon you can't be going there for your own self. You're going there for him. And that's what our motive is supposed to be. We're there to love the Lord. We're there to serve him. We're there to worship him. That's what our motive has to be. That then begins to change everything in our lives, because that then becomes the motive for everything in our lives. That's what this is all about. That's why somebody who is truly righteous is going to be doing all these things. Yeah, people are going to be amazed, and they're going to talk about him in positive ways, and they're going to remember him. They don't care about that. They care about serving God and loving his people, because that's what God puts into their hearts, because he strips them of their selfishness and replaces it with charity. And when someone has charity and humility, they're going to have a wisdom that is so profound that it cannot be missed by others. But interestingly, the individual themselves, they won't even see it. The more humble you become, the more arrogant you see yourself to be. The more wisdom you have, the more you realize you don't have it. So it all works the opposite way. They're not getting arrogant because, look at the insight I just had. No, they're not looking at it that way at all. Their humility doesn't allow them to do that. But in order to be truly righteous, you have to go through all the stages and all the purifications to get there. So brace yourself. This isn't a quick, easy thing, and it's not always fun. Sometimes it's pretty wonderful. Most of the time it's pretty dry. But that's okay, because that's God working in our soul to make us those people who are truly righteous.